Good morning, everyone. It's Sarah Q again, sitting on my back deck once again because my house is a disaster, so it's much prettier out here, but it is chilly, so if I'm shivering, that's why. I hope you all are having a good start to your Good Friday. Today for the devotion, rather than focusing on the events leading up to Jesus' death, I am going to leave that to the Stations of the Cross video that Lee and Courtney put together. It is beautiful, and if you have not seen it, we will stick a link below this video so that you can go and view it. And it talks so wonderfully about all the things that happened up until Jesus died on the cross. And where I'm going to pick up for the devotion today is the events immediately following the death of Christ, and talk a little bit about the people who were there on the scene to make sure that he had a proper burial. But before I do that, I'm going to tell you a little story about Della and I. The other day we were walking through our neighborhood. We've been trying really hard to walk more and take our dogs for walks more. They're much happier now. We're much better dog parents during quarantine than when we're not at home so much. And the other night, though, nobody else in the family wanted to go with me except Della, and we left the dogs behind, so we were able to walk faster and talk a lot more. Della was telling me about how that day a YouTuber had been on live raising money for victims of COVID-19, so people who have been adversely financially impacted and needed help getting food and diapers for their babies and all sorts of things that so many families need right now. And so I was able to talk to Della about how that YouTuber was using her influence and her platform to do good in the world. And, you know, we talked a little bit about how no matter who you are, and whether you're a musician or an artist or an actor who is famous, or you're the mayor of a town or a teacher or a nurse or a truck driver or a pastor or, you know, whatever position you hold, that we all have people in our lives who love us and care for us and look to us and who we influence, and that we are called to use that influence for good, whether we're in a crisis or not. And that got me thinking a little bit about Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea, two men who were on the scene after Jesus died on the cross. And it is said that Joseph of Arimathea was a good and just man. Nicodemus had come to Jesus a little bit earlier in the Bible in the night, asking him questions and trying to learn more about his teachings. And they both were following Jesus from afar, from a safe distance. They loved his teachings and they loved him, but they were fearful partly because of their positions within the Jewish community. Nicodemus was a Pharisee and Joseph was part of the Sanhedrin, which was the Jewish council led by the high priests, and they were worried about what might happen to them if they were outright followers of Jesus Christ. But though they had been fearful during Jesus' life, something happened when he died on that cross, and the veil was torn in the temple, and they were emboldened to risk their wealth and their stature in their community in order to do what was right, in order to take care of Christ's body. They wanted a proper burial for him. So Joseph of Arimathea boldly went to Pilate and asked him for Jesus' body, which he was granted. And Nicodemus came with 75 pounds of myrrh and aloe, which was way more than was needed for a proper burial. And they took him down and took care of Jesus. In John 19, starting in verse 38, it says, "After all this, Joseph of Arimathea, he was a disciple of Jesus, but secretly, because he was intimidated by the Jews, petitioned Pilate to take the body of Jesus. Pilate gave permission, so Joseph came and took the body. Nicodemus, who had first come to Jesus at night, came now in broad daylight, carrying a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 75 pounds. They took Jesus' body and, following the Jewish burial custom, wrapped it in linen with the spices. There was a garden near the place he was crucified, and in the garden a tomb in which no one had been yet placed. So, because it was Sabbath preparation for the Jews and the tomb was convenient, they placed Jesus in it. They were under a time crunch because it was preparation day. It was Friday, the day before the Sabbath, so the Jews were getting ready so that they could observe the Sabbath and have a day of rest that Saturday. Everyone who had been at the tomb earlier, other than Mary Magdalene and the other Mary, mother of Joseph and James, had scattered. So it was Nicodemus, Joseph of Arimathea, and the two Marys who were there to prepare Jesus' body. The others were quite honestly afraid of being apprehended and punished for having been associated with Jesus. They didn't want to be seen as accomplices. So this act of boldness that Nicodemus and Joseph showed really is noteworthy. And Joseph of Arimathea was actually mentioned in all four Gospels. So in thinking about Joseph and Nicodemus and ourselves, I've always felt guilty when I read the story of Peter, because I think if I would have been around in the time of Christ, I totally would have been a Peter. I would have been a denier. I would have been close, but when it came down to it, I don't know that I would have been willing to acknowledge Christ if I thought that it might cost me my life. So Joseph of Arimathea is very endearing to me. Like, I see, he kind of reminds me a little bit of Peter because he was making sure he followed Jesus from a safe distance. But then in the end, he really comes through and does what he needs to do. Joseph and Nicodemus acted at the right time with courage and conviction. They came out of their hiding places and used their influence while risking much personally in order to honor Christ. So as we go through Good Friday and enter Holy Saturday, sometimes called Silent Saturday, I highly recommend looking up and reading an article, or it's more of a pondering, called Learning to Wait in the Dark, a Holy Saturday Reflection. And it is by Barbara Brown Taylor, who is a priest and author. And I can also send the link to that so that you can read it. Just look right under this posting. I'm going to read you just a quick excerpt from Barbara Brown Taylor's reflections. That was where Jesus spent Holy Saturday, in a dark hole in the ground, doing absolutely nothing. It was the Sabbath after all. His friends had worked hard to make sure he was laid to rest before the sun went down. Then they went home to rest too, because that was what they did on Saturdays. Once it was clear that there was nothing they could do to secure their own lives or the lives of those they loved, they rested in the presence of the Maker of all life and waited to see what would happen next. So as we enter a time of waiting, knowing that Christ has died and is in the tomb, maybe we can ponder the lessons from Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea. Maybe we can think about where our fears lie, as well as what emboldens us in regard to our faith. Have we fully comprehended that the temple veil was ripped and God is present with us each and every day in the midst of our fear and during our courageous moments? These are the things that I am pondering, and I hope you find them meaningful and that you can continue in light of Maundy Thursday and the commandment to love one another, to find people to love while we wait on Silent Saturday for the coming of Easter on Sunday. Peace be with you.